Georges St-Pierre is easily one of the greatest MMA fighters to ever step into the ring. He's swept legs and he's swept the competition time and again until he became one of the undisputed best in the world. He didn't do it by rolling out of bed one morning and deciding he wanted to just be the best. He earned it with blood, sweat, and tears. He has had to adopt some incredibly strict training in order to get to where he ended up by the end of his career, and we're going to lay all that out for you right now. If you follow MMA, then he needs no introduction. But if you're new to the sport, or if you've been living under a rock for God knows how long, then you might not understand why we'd make such a big deal out of this guy and his training routine. Georges St-Pierre was born in Canada back in 1981, and when he stepped into the ring, he was stepping into his element. He has often spoken about when someone wants to talk about the best of the best in the sport. He fought in 2 different divisions of the Ultimate Fight Championship and became a title-holding champion in both the welterweight and middleweight divisions. And he didn't just become the welterweight title holder once or twice. He claimed that title 3 separate times, giving him a pretty dominant run while he was competing. People called him the single best welterweight fighter on the entire planet, and they kept pointing to him for that accolade for several years in a row. The fighting world was on fire at the height of his career, and publications couldn't keep his name off their pages for a while. Rogers Sportsnet called him Canada's Athlete of the Year for 3 years in a row. Fight Matrix called him the most accomplished fighter in history and the top MMA welterweight to ever step in the ring. When he retired, he was the reigning welterweight champion in December 2013, and he held the most win in title bouts and the second longest combined title streak in the history of UFC, which was well over 6 years worth of time. And he didn't just compete when he fought, he totally dominated his opponents. He fended off nearly a dozen title challenges before retiring. St-Pierre obviously loved the sport because after he retired, he came back to the octagon after a few years. He fought in the middleweight division against Michael Bisping, granting him the honor of becoming the 4th fighter in the history of the UFC to be a multi-division champion. Georges St-Pierre was a huge proponent of eating well. Often when people ask him about his training, he's sure to mention that a massive part of his fight prep is his nutrition. He is not the type of person to just throw whatever's convenient into his body. It's all carefully curated to give him precisely the nutrients he needs to keep his body at peak performance. He understands that his mind is drawing from the food he puts into his body just as much as his muscles are, so he's careful to keep his meals clean and efficient. In fact, he was so serious about it during the height of his career that he famously made sure to seek out some of the best in the realm of nutrition science after he defended his welterweight title in his second fight against, you guessed it, BJ Penn. After this tight match, he sought out the help of Dr. John Berardi from Precision Nutrition. His goal with this partnership was to boost the amount of muscle he had to work with so he could take down Penn next time he came around, as well as augmenting his ability to recover from his brutal workouts and some of his worst fights. Dr. Berardi saw how serious St-Pierre was and professionally recommended that he worked with a pair of Montreal chefs. This is where Jennifer Nicol and Rosario Ross Guerreri enter the equation. You've probably heard these names in passing, and that's because he often credits them with maintaining his health and fitness when he was constantly fending off challenges to his titles in the late 2000s. With the help of these 3, St-Pierre was able to pack on 12 pounds of lean muscle in just 2 months. This incredible feat came from an incredibly specific diet routine. His nutritionist came up with a pretty airtight diet plan that was based around what they ended up calling anytime meals and post-workout meals. These plans were given to his chefs, and they came up with a pretty extensive menu for Georges St-Pierre to work around with that would always fit his caloric and macro needs no matter what kind of mood he was in. Pierre was an incredibly active dude, but even after he packed a dozen pounds of muscle, he was still less than 200 pounds. He needed a lot more food than the average person, but the requirement to stay lean and underneath a certain weight threshold meant that he'd only need about 3,200 to 3,500 calories a day. His macros weren't too far off the average charts either. He needed around 250 grams of protein, 350 grams of carbs, and 100 grams of fat. His post-workout meals would be higher in protein and carbs, while being lower in fat to take advantage of his body's craving for protein after taking a beating. He would use his anytime meals to get a little more protein and his body's daily allowance of fat, while staying away from foods that are high in carbs. His protein shakes were pretty straightforward. The important thing was that they happened in between meals. These quote-unquote super shakes would be before or during a workout if he was really hungry, but if he could hold off, then it would be a treat between his post-workout meal and an anytime meal later in the day. The shakes were made with almond milk and water and paired with 4 fish oil capsules, just a scoop of protein powder, some supplements to fit his mood, and a cup of frozen mixed berries to keep his diet from becoming stagnant. His anytime meal would be about even in calories with his post-workout meal, but it needed to be much lower in carbohydrates since he'd already have topped himself off after his workout. This is a good time to go for the leafy greens, efficient foods like beans, or lots of fruit and a protein that will tide you over until the next meal. This is the kind of meal you sit down and savor. If you're a soup guy, some pho or creamy broccoli soup would do the trick, paired with some clean veggies. His post-workout meal would be high in carbs, and it needed to be ready to eat directly after his workout. That meant it needed to be ready to be eaten cold. A good sandwich with plenty of protein and a side of fruits or chips and crackers is something he'd opt for to get his body ready to repair itself after a particularly tough bout in the gym. You could get as creative as you want or not with this meal. Tacos, rice balls, or a cold burrito could all serve as a healthy post-workout meal in this situation. While his diet had been broken down to a science and he had the help of a pair of incredibly talented chefs on his side, Georges St-Pierre's meals didn't have to be incredibly complicated. Reaching his macros was a matter of thinking ahead and finding simple solutions to a problem. His chefs understood that getting the right amount of protein did not mean he had to sit down with a steak and a bowl of kale for every single meal. St-Pierre would down 2 protein shakes every single day, along with a couple of protein bars every now and then. The downside to such a scientific approach to your diet is that it isn't always very glamorous. Sometimes hitting your macros means hunching over a gym bag in the middle of your workout and jamming a Cliff Bar into your face so you can hit the right amount of nutrients. The upside, however, is that there was ample time for rewards. Part of keeping your diet simple and achievable is leaving wiggle room. That's where the protein bars and shakes would come in handy. This is also where he would plan out his 3 major meals. Once he had worked his way through all of that, if he was still hungry, there was always room for a free meal, and that could be whatever he wanted it to be. The example he would use in interviews was always McDonald's. They would be counting calories, so this meant he would leave an amount of quote-unquote discretionary calories that could be anything from beans to Brewsters. In more general terms, giving yourself the freedom to branch out when you need to be pretty tight with your diet actually helps to keep you on track, because you're not going to be feeling like you want to break the rules every week. Throughout his time competing in MMA, George was in and out of a number of gyms. For example, it's widely known that he trained at the Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy in New York City before he took on BJ Penn during UFC 58. But he also trained at other academies, like when he earned his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Bruno Fernandes back in September of 2008. St-Pierre began training with titans like Rashid Evans, Nathan Marquardt, Keith Jardine and Donald Cerrone at Greg Jackson's submission fighting Gaido Jutsu School in New Mexico. He would later train with some of these students in Montreal before he threw down during UFC 94, which was another match against his eternal rival BJ Penn at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. What kind of work will they do beyond learning how to fight each other though? Being an MMA fighter is much about maintaining your physique, as it's about learning your martial art. Granted, sparring to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an intense activity. You could make an entire workout routine based on that alone, and you'd be blasting fat and excess carbs off of your body. The first thing to realize about Georges St-Pierre was that he didn't just limit himself to a single gym, a single trainer, or a single discipline. That's what set him apart from other mixed martial artists. He was voraciously gobbling up every single scrap of martial artistry he possibly could. It served to keep him in shape, as well as keeping his mind sharp. You need your workout to accommodate your lifestyle. If St-Pierre was in the gym lifting the heaviest weights he could to get as jacked as possible, he wouldn't have the flexibility or the speed that it takes to keep up with the best MMA fighters in the world. His workout is practical in the sense that it develops the muscles he needs the most when the chips are down. When you're getting kicked in the head, you want the speed and strength to overpower your opponent. He opts for a workout routine that fits his needs, just like you should. If you want an MMA physique, then this one is for you. But otherwise, you should find someone with the body type you're looking for and stick to that. St-Pierre went through a system designed by Firas Zahabi of TriStar Gym. You'll recognize that as one of the many academies Pierre trained in. It is a routine that's designed to keep him nimble and explosive, while also forcing him to adapt to extended periods of explosive movement. This circuit is amazing because its basic structure allows you to totally customize it to your level of fitness. You're going to be able to add more exercises or shave off some reps if you truly can't keep up. It's also an excellent routine for anybody that's looking to cut down on their gym memberships. All it takes is a pair of 25-pound dumbbells and you're off to the races. The circuit warm-up. Standing sprint for 30 seconds, high knees for 30 seconds, plank burpees for 30 seconds, and speed push-ups for another 30 seconds. Circuit 1. Repeat this 3 times with 45 seconds of rest in between circuit reps. Dumbbell squats to shoulder press, 15 reps. Wide bent over dumbbell rows, 15 reps. And walking dumbbell lunge, 16 reps. Circuit 2. Repeat 3 times with 45 seconds of rest in between. Single leg push-ups, 10 reps per side, and bent over rows, 10 reps per side. Circuit 3. Repeat 3 times with rest at your discretion. 30 seconds of shadow boxing, bent over power rows for 30 seconds alternating each arm, and bicep curls for 30 seconds. What follows is a brief cool-down period consisting of 20 weighted crunches, 20 floor wipers, and 50 bicycle crunches. Georges St-Pierre was a top-notch fighter. He clearly had something in him that other mixed martial artists were lacking. He spent all of his time bouncing around from academy to academy, absorbing every single piece of knowledge he possibly could. He was ferocious when he got in the ring, and he refused to back down from a challenge. You could see that in his work ethic, his fighting style, and his pursuit of knowledge. He was a champion in every sense of the word, and he truly earned all of those #1 spots granted to him by the media. If you're thinking of taking on his workout routine, don't start with an exact replica. If you can pare things down to a level manageable for you, then you'll be able to build yourself up to St-Pierre's level of competence. Sure, he may have been a professional athlete with more time and money than the average Gym Joe, but his methods aren't so far beyond anything you'd be able to achieve with a little bit of time and dedication to your health and fitness. That's all for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and also share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more lifestyle content and make sure to turn on the notifications for future updates about your favorite super rich personalities.